On today's Minute of the Apes, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
What is the divine bomb?
We are the good human and the dead human! Where there is fire, there is smoke.
The Minute of the Apes. 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 Yay!
Hello and welcome to Minute of the Apes, the daily podcast where we break down every minute of the Planet of the Apes movies, 1 minute at a time. I'm Todd. Sean was there teasing us, and Richard is sitting there with the lawgiver over his shoulder. We are ready for Wednesday.
Yes.
And you know, with this new production thing, which will save me a boatload of time, I sit there and I almost I thought to cue myself whenever it came time to...
3, 2, 1, go.
Because I'm sitting there going, who do I cue? And I was like, oh, hey, idiot, it's
Oh, it's
yourself.
me.
You can't cue me. I can't.
Wait, you could do that. You could go 3, 2, 1.
Yes, I could, but I don't think I'm going to because no matter how vain I might be, I'm not that vain. How are you guys on this Wednesday?
All right. It's comic day.
It's new comic book day. I'm vain as always. I'm ready.
And the reason Sean is looking for snow is sitting here in the Dallas area. We have been told that winter storm watch is on.
Perching, yeah.
It's already snowing in Austin, and Austin is 3-4
Way
hours
south of us, yeah.
And it's already snowing down there.
Well, yay. I like snow.
Yay.
Bully for them.
It's not going to, I mean, we might get a little bit of accumulation, but it's not going
It's
to
dusting, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It hasn't been cold enough long enough to anything to
No.
say.
I think that whenever Texas gets snow, you know, it's just such a rarity here that we all get a little excited, and that idea that winter is coming.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, growing up down south of Houston in Sugar Land, when I was a kid, it was in like Fort Bend. I can't remember where the hell it was. Never mind. Anyway, back when I was growing up, one day I remember we got snow, and you could take the entire front yard and make one snowball out of it.
Well, yeah, I was
That's
going to
how
joke
much snow we
about that. Growing up in Oklahoma, we could make snowmen. Growing up in, being part down here in North Texas, we're lucky to get a snowball.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just part of living here. You know, and here my kid is about to go off to college in Colorado, and she is just beside herself because even when we went to
All the snow?
Well, the day that we went to tour the campus, honest to God, was the first day of COVID. The idea that we're going to lock everything down. She's standing there. The snow's coming down on us. It's beautiful, and of course she wants to get away and go up there. That's beautiful and romantic, right? But
when it starts melting and all that, then she's going to hate it.
Well, I don't know about that. It's cold. There's nothing romantic about being cold.
Well, and the funny thing is, she's just like my mom. My mom is one of those incredibly cold-natured people that never warms up. And so I'm like, Abby, maybe you're going to go up here and you're going to freeze your ass off. But she loves the idea of it.
Again, growing up down in Houston, my wife, JJ, she grew up here in Dallas. And so from my point of view, every winter it was snowing up here and they were having snowball fights. And, it was, down in Houston, we're sweating it out. And then I move up here and it never snowed. And then we moved to Oklahoma for 2 years. And then it snowed here in Dallas when we moved away. And then we moved back and occasionally we get snow.
So you're the reason we don't ever get snow.
Yeah, pretty much.
That and climate change. I mean,
well, that does have a little effect on it.
Factoring it in a little bit, yeah.
Well, I think what we're going to get into today has no snow in it whatsoever. Because we're stepping right back into Conquest. We've got chimpanzees in green suits and gorillas in red, very few orangutans. Sean, tell us what's going on with Minute 3 from Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
We're going to start with the voiceover orangutan saying, setting his fellow creatures free, and ends with Caesar sharing a banana.
All right, let's take a listen. Minute 3, Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
His fellow creatures free from the yoke of human slavery. No!
As minute 3, we have an orangutan, and I'm still not including flashbacks to count.
I'm the
So
only
we count
one that
character.
is. I'm the only one watching the video of this. I still haven't gotten our technology to the point where we all get to watch it at once, and we'll get you guys there.
I just watched it. I've watched it before we started this back up again.
But as I'm watching that clip, I once again, why in Conquest did they not have more orangutans? They showed the one shot at the kind of the outside courtyard, and you see
would
maybe
see 2 or 3 of them at the most. Yeah,
I counted. There were actually 4, and I counted 4 standing, and they're behind everything. Why were the orangutans just sort of pushed aside for this film?
I could not tell you. It does not make sense.
Well, once again, we're left with a clip where it's a huge bit of just watching what you've already seen, and it's not even compelling action. It's just sort of this mundane Caesar being taken, and you can see the slavery, and I did think of that. Okay, he talks about the slavery, and you see them being pulled. You see the flames being shot out.
What and related to this I'm going to get back to your comment via this comment. They don't show any of Armando in this, and so
True.
I'm assuming that's because of film rights, and they didn't want to pay to have him pay him to use him in this movie. But I'm going with, in my internal canon, is the voiceover orangutan who's telling this story has deliberately cut him out of the story so that the only interactions that we see from humans are bad ones, being mean to them, killing his parents, beating him up. You don't see humans being nice to him ever, and you only see him being nice to apes.
Well, Todd, you were talking about this particular minute and what you saw when they're in ape management and the apes are being kind of taught things and being pulled and pushed around. But my recollection of this moment in the prior film, they were showing a lot more of the brutality and the nose,
the torture,
and
that one table where they're torturing.
So coming after the scene where Zira and Cornelius are shot, and we're jumping to, we assume, is Caesar the savior being led into ape management. It's kind of a little bit of a cut. We're just supposed to jump to the fact that we know that he's an adult now and he's being brought into somewhere. It's not known if you've never seen these movies before. They look like guards that are making the apes do things, but not necessarily, they're not showing the brutality that we saw in the previous film where it's not quite so hard.
Right.
And it's kind of a weird pullback of the violence a little bit.
And I actually had that note for tomorrow, Richard, but I'm glad you said it today, was that it feels as though when we watch Conquest, and I think Conquest is probably, to this point, the most brutal of the films to watch. I think that's, and arguably what they're trying to do is this idea of slavitude, of being tortured, of all these things. They almost whitewash this movie. It just becomes kind of, they're pulled along. And,
more like a procedural. All right, let's move it through the system. So get them over to this table.
There are so many things they could have shown, too, kind of to your point. I mean, there are other images from this film that would have been more compelling, and especially, images of Caesar where the people are looking at him. I might have even taken a juxtaposition of those shots when we laughed about it, but, where he's nodding at people. I might have taken those instead of what I see, because it says a little bit more about what Caesar became. The apes looked at him than him just wandering around seeing people enslaved.
Inside ape management and that kind of stuff. It's also just like the last minute. We're getting a sentence or two from the lawgiver, and then just a minute of clip, and it was just it's a little bit of a letdown. Like I'm like, at least embellish what's being shown.
Yes.
Some, give me a little more of the voiceover here.
Yeah, I mean, you do need the voiceover so that you can establish that this is Caesar, because you might not necessarily know that, who this is if you haven't seen the previous movies. But yeah, there should be, since there's so little happening, there should be, since we've cut out the violence, he should be talking about the violence. Caesar was brought into captivity and, beaten and, made to be a servant, a slave, and serve man at his whims, and then but he found his people and led them to freedom or something like that.
The clips weren't in the script. It was just the lawgiver giving the speech. There's only a couple of words here and there that was changed, and one line that was added in his entire speech. So John Huston may have done all of this before they decided to actually add the clips in, and so they're trying to mash it up with some imagery.
If you just had him talking and what we've heard so far is not that much talking. But with him also writing, that's like a minute maybe of film. So I think they padded this out with flashbacks as well to make the movie longer, because it's not a particularly long movie.
No, you could have shown me Caesar being led into the ape management. You could have shown with the intense moment with the flame, and then cut to somebody being tortured on the table, maybe even Caesar himself, just like 30 seconds of a moment. You're like, okay, this is a brutal world. And I could have gone from there.
So the world of voiceover in film always gets this bad rap that
because it's a shortcut.
Yeah. But for every time you do that, I think you can find great examples of when voiceover works beautifully. This just doesn't work at all, because you would hope that what they would do is perhaps, let's go back to God's wrath and he gave them the Savior. That's where I would have put the shot of baby Milo. I would have done something. It's a direct correlation, but you're telling that story. And here we are.
You know what? Well, I can't remember. Did it say Milo on his chain at the end, or not?
No.
No, because he's supposed to be a different baby at the end. It was just a necklace that he had or something on that we knew, right?
Yeah. And if they've done anything like that to have these things, and to your point about maybe they didn't want to pay the royalties to have Armando, they own that footage. I don't think you had to pay anything, and in that day, the pay scale would have been so different.
It's relevant to tomorrow as well, but if we're going back to Escape and also to Conquest to show these clips, they're not showing any of the villains or human characters that we need to see. It's very unusual that we don't see Hasline or Breck, or in this particular case, very unusual we're not seeing McDonald in these clips right here somewhere.
But
I think they don't want to because there are, and I don't know if it was prevalent back then, but there are terms and contracts for actors that say if you use my footage in a new broadcast and it's old footage, you still have to pay me for that. So it might be an example of we don't want to pay these people. We've only got our $1 million+ budget, so any corners that we can cut, let's cut them out of it.
Or to Richard's point, maybe what it is that this is the lawgiver trying to tell the story, and do you paint? If you
paint human, you can paint out all the humans that you can, unless they're bad.
Right, because if you're telling the story of Ape Jesus, do you want to tell that story in a softened tone? So he rose above this. If I'm telling the story of Moses, do I really want to see the villain as much as I want to see the ascension of the hero?
And we're likely to believe when we come back to the first one, Planet of the Apes, the very first movie, and they're going through the old scrolls, we're likely to see Caesar's name and less likely to see Breck as a name.
McDonald.
We're not. Those things weren't relevant. I think by avoiding them, they're avoiding a potential mistake in the first movie by not having these people already illuminated as villains.
Well,
man becomes just evil to and of himself, but we could still see their shots in this. We could still see Breck shoot an ape. Now they're going for a G rating, so maybe that's why they try to tame down.
They're taking some out of the violence.
The Conquest, the Conquest stuff, make it not quite so brutal.
As you said that, that's where you could have gotten into this with showing the villains as opposed to what the voiceover is. So that idea again that you don't want voiceover just to be, we're going to now tell you this and show you this. That would have been interesting as they told these things, if that's when they showed the villain juxtaposed against it. If we'd seen Hasline doing what he did when you're talking about, I don't know.
That would be interesting. It's that when they talk about the evil